Welcome to the Knicks Film School Postgame Show, powered by BetUS TV. I'm excited to do this one. I'm excited to do this one for a few reasons, not the least of which is that we, in our own way, here at Knicks Film School tonight, will celebrate the man, the myth, the legend, the one and only Clyde Frazier, a man who I have been lucky enough to have on this podcast. He is as close to a living institution as you could find in any city, certainly. And the Knicks honored him tonight in winning a game that I think not only Clyde, but any of Clyde's teammates on those great championship teams, the late 60s and early 70s, any of them would have appreciated this win because it was a win that came with defense. It was a win that came with moving the basketball. It was a win that came with being smart, outthinking your opponent, which after some, early foibles, the Knicks eventually got around to doing. And I think most of all, it was a win that showed perseverance. And I want to get back to some of those qualities and some of the individual people who were responsible for getting us to this point. In what was a 31-point second half turnaround. And it wasn't because the team that they were playing stopped trying or did what the Wizards did, what was it, last weekend or about a little over a week ago, and pulled all their guys because they wanted to lean into a tank, as shameful as that is. The Blazers went a little cold late, but that team's, for the better part of 3 months, has been one of the most relentless teams in the NBA. And they did not hand that game to the Knicks. The Knicks took that game. And that's where I want to go here for the real theme of this one, because, I just had Chris Herring on the pod earlier this week. I talked to Fred Katz recently. I talked to Tim McMahon a little bit about, this year's team and where it might be going. And obviously I've done a lot of these post-game shows. And I think the theme, and it's not just here at Knicks Film School, it's certainly elsewhere, I'm seeing this theme of just, it's like there is a wet blanket over this season. And I don't know if that's because of the fact that the difference between last season and this season is the fact that last season we were entering into a summer in which the Knicks still had all of their assets, and now most of their assets are out the door. I don't know if it's how they have lost games this year. I don't know if it's something with the individual players. I don't know if it's just that it just wasn't. It's just not last year's team, because last year's team was so unique and so special. Obviously, the big losses to the very best teams in this league have stung and have, kind of dampened any kind of a mood that, hey, maybe, just maybe, this team has what it takes to win a championship. There's lots of reasons why the situation is what it is. But what I'm here to say tonight is that if you are, and I'm put myself right in the group of people that I'm about to talk about, because I've been here. If you are a person who has found themselves butting the Knicks' success this season, or just more generally what this team is or what they are capable of, I think it is time to turn around and appreciate the fact that, is it last year's team? Does it have whatever that stuff was, that special sauce that last year's team had? No, because we could watch basketball for 100 more years and never see anything quite like the 2023-24 Knicks. And we said that last year. We recognized it in the moment. But this team is starting to write its own story. And I know it's not the story that maybe people expected out of the gate. I know the story hasn't been neatly, it's not a neat little narrative, as we always kind of like these things to be. It has had ups and downs. It has had, some moments that have really, really, really gotten us as a fan base down. But this is a legitimate story that they're writing. And I think if you wanted to question them up until the point in time where Jalen Brunson went down with an injury that has now kept him out for, I believe it is up to a dozen games. And he's missed 13 games on the season, if you include the Jazz game that he missed on New Year's Day. So we could only obviously miss 4 more games before he doesn't qualify for postseason awards. But that's neither here nor there. It's been 12 games that Brunson has been out. Has it been a murderer's row schedule over those 12 games? No, not particularly. But look around the NBA. Look around the NBA on any given night. Especially when you get into these doldrums of February and March, and now we're sitting here and looking up, and we're a couple days away from April. Like just the other night, Friday night, well, we were watching Knicks Bucks at T Squared. The whole time I was keeping my eye on Pistons Cavs, and here are the Pistons, without Cade Cunningham, kind of running away with the game against the Cleveland Cavaliers, who are at full strength. And like it was nothing. And that's just one example. There's tons and tons and tons of examples. You have teams out there firing their coach, set to host a home playoff series, firing their coach with 2 weeks to go, or less than 2 weeks to go. I mean, there is wild, wacky stuff going on out there. And so when you look back at this dozen games and how this thing could have gone without Jalen Brunson, and now you look up and they are 7-5 in these 12 games. And man, they have showed some toughness. Like, is it the same type of toughness as last year's team? I don't know. And frankly, I don't really care. All I know was that was a team that went out there tonight, looked like they were going to run away with this thing, going up by, I think they went up by as many as 10 points in the first half. You had Precious Achiuwa out there looking like, Kevin Durant, 5 for 5, I believe he was in the first half, turning defense into offense. And then all of a sudden, boom, the Portland Trailblazers go on it was like a kind of out of the blue. I think it actually caught the Knicks by surprise. What ended up being a 15-0 run. Hi, Sass. My daughter's very excited because her and my wife just made the dog homemade dog biscuits, because this is what you do. What? From the Meghan Markle show, right? Yeah, there you go. Anyway, I'm in the middle of my monologue. You got to let me cook. And then, out of nowhere, they're down. It's the biggest deficit of the game at halftime. And then Knicks come out, nice little 4-0 run. Okay, they're riding the ship out of halftime. And then, boom, again, Portland hits them in the mouth with another run at 10-0. And so at that point, you're down by 14, and you're like, hi, Maddie. Show. Yes, the star of the show. And at that point, I'm like, oh my goodness, is this going to be one of those games that I'm going to have to get up on the post game and be hemming and hawing and like, yeah, they lost by double digits against a team that's going to be in the lottery. But if you really think about it, this and that, and they couldn't hit the far side of a bar. They won. Go, get lost with the dog. Go. You're breaking my concentration. It's one thing they're in super chats. You can't interrupt my monologue. Go. No, go now. That's good parenting, folks. You gotta know when to put your foot down. Anyway, so I was already thinking ahead to what this post-game show was going to be, and I didn't really like where it was going. But then they made it so that I didn't have to do that. And I thought, for as great as the fourth quarter was, and they ended up outscoring the Blazers. They doubled up the Blazers 31-15 in the fourth quarter. I thought the push in the third quarter was incredibly impressive, because they would make some shots, they would go on a little run, and then the Blazers would come back and hit a shot to break momentum. And then the Knicks would get another bucket or two, and then the Blazers would get another bucket or two to break momentum. And there were moments there where if this Knicks team wasn't made of what they are made of, that they could have wilted, and this could have at the very least been a nail biter down the stretch. But that's not the game that we got. And that's not the game that we got because all of a sudden, without their best player and without one of the very best players in basketball, ironically, without Jalen Brunson, this team is showing you why we all thought, and many people around the NBA and observers of the league thought this team had a chance to do some special things this year. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to talent. Yes, it comes down to how good your talent fits together. And I will be the first person to admit that for as much as Jalen Brunson is a guy who is as unselfish as any star in the league and only cares about winning more than any star in the league, is there going to be an adjustment period perhaps when he comes back? Yeah, there's going to be an adjustment period that when he comes back, and they're not going to have a lot of time. I mean, obviously we got a Brunson update today. It was a positive update. Sounds like he's going to play in some games before the end of the regular season. You know, we don't have a specific timetable, but, you know, again, positive stuff. So they're not going to have a ton of time. But if you look at what this team is doing, you know, not only did they win this game tonight without Jalen Brunson and with their fourth and fifth string point guards, their second consecutive game, by the way, winning with their fourth and fifth string point guards. How many other teams in the league could say that they are able to do that? Not only did they not have Brunson, Karl-Anthony Towns had probably the worst offensive game of his season. He was 4-13 for 10 points, had 2 turnovers, and he was so ineffective on offense that Tom Thibodeau in the second half, and Towns, you know, played only 32 minutes in the game, and he wasn't really in foul trouble. He only had 3 fouls on the night. Tom Thibodeau, instead of bringing Cat back in when Mitch had kind of, and we're going to talk about Mitchell Robinson, when Mitch had kind of, you know, extended himself as far as he could, brought in Precious Achiuwa for defense. Now, that's a compliment to Precious Achiuwa, but it's also indicative of what kind of a game that Karl-Anthony Towns was having. And then eventually, again, you know, I know everybody already has this coach fired, and that's fine. Another game where Tom Thibodeau pushes all the right buttons, took the defense first lineup about as far as it could go, then brings in the Karl-Anthony Towns. All of a sudden, it juices the offense. He's rested enough to give you enough, and everybody else gave you enough on defense to take them home, and that was that. But like, to win the game without the guys that you either didn't have playing well. And how did they win it? Well, now we can start to go through some of the heroes, and there's no shortage. How appropriate was it that both Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby finished with exactly 28 points in this game? Now, Mikal Bridges needed a few more shots to get there, and that's because OG continues to get to the line at a high rate. But those two guys were obviously the stars of the show. I was pulling for OG to get one more basket. That's why when Tibbs didn't take them out with like a minute and a half to go, he left them in for one more possession. I was like, oh, I wonder if he left them out so OG can get his 30th. And then Hart, I think it was about a minute to go or just over a minute to go, the last Knicks possession before he pulled pulled the starters. Hart could have dumped it off for OG, which I thought he might do because that would have given him 10 assists and that would have given OG 30 points. It would have been the first time in OG Anunoby's career that he had back-to-back 30-point games. Alas, it was not to be. Still, OG Anunoby is playing the best offensive basketball of his career. And I thought if there was, for as much as of a team win as this was, if there was an MVP of this game, his name was OG Anunoby. And, you know, Denny Avdia, a true star in the making, was having his way in every which way in this game. Still finished with a really heck of a game, 33 points, but ended up with 33 on 25 shots and 3 turnovers. There was a point in time where OG was like, enough is enough. And I lost count of how many splash plays OG Anunoby made in the second half of this game. On not only Denny Avdia, but on several Blazers players. Again, you're never really going to see the full impact. He did have 3 steals and 2 blocks, which is like, that's pretty darn good. Maybe the coolest thing about his stretch that he's in right now, I put the stat in the newsletter earlier today. If you go every 15-game sample of OG Anunoby's career, the 15-game sample up until the Bucks game, he had not only the highest scoring average of any 15-game sample in his career, but the highest scoring average by over a point. That average is now going to go up even more. And over that entire time, averaging just about 3 stocks per game. So steals plus blocks. And tonight he had 5 stocks. So this is the OG Anunoby that you signed to a $200 million contract and you don't think twice about. It's why of all of the hemming and hawing and consternation over the Bridges trade and the Cat trade, and what we're missing and, oh my God, if they had been able to keep Hardenstein and this and that. The one thing that I've never wavered on, and I don't think anybody who is really knows what they're doing or knows what they're talking about has ever wavered on, has been bringing OG Anunoby back. I know he has bouts of inconsistency, but you see the way that guy is able to change the game. He was the best player in the game tonight. With all due respect to Denny Avdia. And Denny Avdia was pretty freaking good. Hot on his tail, of course, though, Mikal Bridges. Listen, we don't need Mikal Bridges to be perfect. We don't need Mikal Bridges to be an all-star level scorer. We don't need any of those things. What we need is when the opportunity knocks, we need Mikal Bridges to be there to answer the bell. And in the second half of this game, when the Knicks just needed some sort of reliable source of offense, after Mikal's prayer to end the first quarter, there was a stretch there from, really the entire second quarter up until the first maybe 3-4 minutes of the third quarter, where the Knicks just weren't finding any points. They were stuck on 54 points until almost the 8-minute mark of the third quarter. So you're talking about that's 26 points scored over a 16-minute stretch. That's not great. And they needed Mikal Bridges to be all right, listen, I got this. And the same way that his tandem with Josh Hart was their entire offense essentially in the fourth quarter of the first Blazers game, his tandem with Josh Hart serving as the screener, was the Knicks source of offense in the second half for the most part of this game, and it was incredibly effective. Which leads us to Hart, which is again maybe the most discussed player on the team this year, because there are so many times where we have wondered, is it really worth it? Is it really worth it to have nobody guarding him or to have the center playing 10, 15 feet off of him? Is it really worth it? Well, this was another one of those games that you reminded you that, it's worth it. Just like he did in Milwaukee, Josh Hart found other ways to impact the game positively. Went and messed around and almost got himself another triple-double, finished with 14 points, 9 assists, 8 rebounds. Those are not empty calorie stats. 3 steals, a couple of foibles here and there, but a positive game. So for the second game in a row, and I don't know how many individual games this season, you probably count on one hand before this weekend, we have said that all 3 wings came and showed up in a big way. We can now say for 2 consecutive games, the 3 Knicks wings, Wingstop, whatever, Wingy Stop Jr., whatever you want to call them, the theory of the case was built around these 3 guys being the best versions of themselves to support the Karl-Anthony Towns, Jalen Brunson dual organizational foundation. They have done it, and they have looked the part. So shout out to all 3 of those guys. Kudos to the point guards again, DeLon Wright, Tyler Kolek, just coming in and doing their job, which is all anybody needed for them to do. I thought it was nice that DeLon Wright hit another 3. This was not something that I was expecting from him. Had a nifty little move around the basket for a finish. 7 points, 3 of 6 shooting, couple of steals, couple of blocks, couple assists, couple of offensive rebounds. DeLon Wright's one of those, again, talk about theory. The theory of DeLon Wright has always been that he's this sort of player. He's not going to stuff any one column of the stat sheet, but he's going to give you a little something in every column. And this was a perfect example of that tonight. Another nice game from Kolek. I mentioned Precious Achiuwa already. I thought really, really solid Precious minutes. I know his last 2 offensive possessions before he got pulled for Towns weren't so nice, but you take what you could get, and he was very good in the first half. And then I'll save these 2 guys for last. Not purposeful, but your 2 game high in terms of plus minus belong to Landry Shamet, a plus 22 in 19 minutes, and Mitchell Robinson, a plus 19 in 14 minutes. I think both of those numbers are maybe not accurate to 100%, but both of those guys gave you good minutes. And I think we were in on Shamet after everybody was out on Shamet, and then we were briefly back in on Shamet, and then we were back way out on Shamet. Are we back in on Shamet? Like, what does this guy have to do? He has to hit shots. And what did he do tonight? He hit shots, and he hit some big ones, 3 of 6 from deep. And then Mitchell Robinson with a really nice effort for the second consecutive games. I know his stat sheet looked a little empty. This was the second consecutive big time performance from Mitchell Robinson, and they needed it. There was a reason why Tibbs continued to roll with him for as long as he did in the second half of this game. Again, echoing my sentiments to start about why this was the perfect win for a Clyde birthday. Team win as this team again continues to write its own story in its own way. And this was game 74. Yeah, game 74. So we got 8 games left to go. The playoffs are going to be here before we know it. Boy, oh boy, I would love to see them get a handful of games with Brunson back so we could see if they could really gain some momentum going into this postseason. They deserve that. They deserve at least that. Now that they have finally found something, I think is it the something they've been looking for the whole year? Maybe.